Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Granada Forum. Tonight, we have a wonderful introduction from a man who recently just spoke at our forum, Mr. Jordan Maxwell, and he's going to be introducing Mr. Ted Gunderson. So without any further ado, let me introduce to you Mr. Jordan Maxwell.
That wasn't me, that's the microphone. Bless you, bless you. My name is Jordan Maxwell, and I want to thank you for all being here with us tonight. I have the privilege of introducing a good friend of mine, Ted Gunderson, who was with the FBI, as many of you know, and is now retired from the FBI. But I don't know that the FBI has ever been, even from its inception, an honorable organization. I don't think there's ever been such a thing as an honorable organization ever to operate it under the U.S. government. But having said that, if we go back into the Old Testament of the Bible, we find that there were men like Daniel, for instance, only one of many. But Daniel was brought into the court of Nebuchadnezzar and turned out to be a very important man, even in government. God puts good men sometimes right in the middle of government. And so there are reasons for this, and I think that Ted Gunderson is a classic example of a modern-day Daniel, a good man put within an organization of the Caesar's government. There has been a lot of good people in government. It doesn't mean the government they work for is good. It just means that they happen by chance to be put there by the Spirit. And so it's been a pleasure to know Ted over the years and to see his work. And it's been rather controversial. But that's, of course, what the truth is, very controversial. And I want to thank Wendy for allowing me to introduce this friend of mine, Ted Gunderson. Where is he? There he is. Thank you.
Thanks, partner. Pleasure to be here. I want you to know that this is from the old FBI, not the new FBI. Full-blooded Italian, full-blooded Indian, whichever direction you want to go with it. I hope everybody has a copy of a memo that I wrote just the other day, new information about the weapon that I think is going to be used by the terrorists in the next attack, and it's called, Could This Be the Terrorist's Next Weapon? Does anybody doesn't have a copy of that? Okay, be sure to get a copy at the table. And in addition to this, the reason I wanted you to have this, I want everybody to have it, I handed this out because people come by my table and some of them pick up the freebies, some of them don't. I have a letter to Ashcroft there and a letter to Ridge, some other material that you need to get copies of, obtain copies of, make copies yourself and distribute them. It pretty well lays out the whole situation, the scenario as it exists in our country today. The two Palestinian women walking down the sidewalk en route to a suicide mission, one says to the other, "Do you think this bomb I'm carrying makes me look heavy?" There's a lady right there. She appreciates that. I've been asked on occasion to tell a few war stories from my experiences in the FBI. 27 plus years. I make no apologies for the work that I did. I had a call just recently from a journalist from New Haven, Connecticut. He's doing a story on one of the cases that I was involved in, the Black Panthers, and he asked me a lot of pointed questions. I was very frank with him. As Jordan says I am controversial. I have a lot of good things said about me, a lot of bad things said about me, but my approach on that is I must be doing something right if there's so many people that are on both sides. And so in this case, this fellow's doing a story about the downfall of the Black Panther Party back in the 1960s. I was very active in that, in the Bureau. And that's just one of the experiences I had. I had experiences in the FBI with skyjackings. I dealt with 2 terrorists, Philadelphia International Airport, July 12, 1972, who had taken over an airplane. Negotiated with them for 2.5 hours successfully. They released the 113 passengers, and we let them get on another jet and take off, and then they had to make an emergency landing in Texas. But I've had some other experiences also, and people ask me about, every once in a while, about my experiences. Those are just 2 of them that I'm relaying to you. And then I had one where an inmate's wife wrote to the inmate and asked, when should I plant the potatoes? And the inmate wrote back and said, for God's sakes, don't plant the potatoes in the garden. That's where the guns are buried. And the letter went through censorship, and his officials rushed to his home, completely dug up his garden. Upon hearing this, the inmate wrote to his wife and said, now plant the potatoes. And that reminds me of another experience I had in the FBI. This big 6'4", 255-pound fellow walks into the supermarket, walks over to a young clerk polishing apples. He said, I want a half head of lettuce. Kid didn't even look up. He says, we don't sell a half head of lettuce. And so he taps him on the shoulder. He said, kid, I want a half a head of lettuce. And the kid looks around. He says, just a minute, sir, I'll be right back. I have to go back and talk to the manager. So he rushed back in the back and rushed up to the manager. He says, the manager says, sir, there's some dumbass out here who wants a half a head of lettuce. Didn't realize this big guy had followed him back there. Turns around, sees him, and he says, and this gentleman wants the other half. And so the manager says, this kid's got a great future with this organization. I want to find out more about him. So later in the day, he ran the kid down. He said, kid, I really like the way you handled yourself. You're going to have a great future with us. Tell me where you're from. The kid says, I'm from Massillon, Ohio. Nothing but prostitutes and football players come from Massillon. And the manager says, my wife's from Massillon. And the kid says, what position does she play? I had other experiences too, but I think that's enough for today, okay? I entered the FBI in 1951, December 10, 1951. I was surprised I got in because I was 22 years old when I applied. You had to be 25, and you had to have 2 or 3 years experience in a supervisory capacity or have a law degree or accounting degree and so forth. I had some accounting background. You would know it if you looked at my checkbook today. But I applied, and the agent who interviewed me says, I think you can make it all right. He said, the only problem you have is you're only 22 years old. And he thought a minute, and he said, his name was Zimmerman. I'll never forget. It was in Detroit, Michigan. He says, I'll tell you what, write a personal letter to J. Edgar Hoover and tell him, although you're only 22, you look like you're 28. And the truth is, I look like I was 19, by the way. But I wrote this letter, and the next thing I know, 6 weeks later, I'm an FBI agent in Quantico, Virginia, in training. From there, I moved around the country. I was, in my career, involved in just about in fact, as a matter of fact, I looked for assignments. I looked for the work that I could handle, so I'd learn everything as much as possible. I know in New York, when we had a bank robbery, a New York City office, we had a bank robbery one afternoon about 4 o'clock on a Friday, and that's when everybody's getting ready to go home. Of course, in New York, you usually have about an hour and a half commute home. At least I did. I lived out Long Island. And the guys are all running for the men's room and getting in the stalls and putting their feet up so you can't see if you look under, to avoid going to the bank robbery. I was out there. I wanted to go. I wanted to learn about it. And that's the way I've been all my life. And thank goodness I am, and thank goodness I had that approach, because when I left the FBI in March of 1979, I rose up through the ranks. I was in charge of the Los Angeles Bureau. I had over 700 personnel under my command. $22 million budget. And then I went out, and up to that point, we had 164 categories which we investigated. And if something came in that fell in those 164 categories, we investigated. If it didn't, we put it in what we called a zero file. So in other words, everything was departmentalized, categorized. But when I got out of the FBI in 1979, I started doing my own research. And that's when the lights went on. And it went on particularly the first major investigation I had. And that was the Dr. Jeffrey R. MacDonald case. It's spelled MacDonald. Dr. MacDonald, former Green Beret captain, had been convicted in August of 1979. I'd been out like 6 months of the murder of his wife and 2 children at Fort Bragg, 2.5 and 5.5-year-old children. Wife was pregnant. And some of his friends came to me, doctor friends, and said, "Will you investigate the case?" And I said, "Yes, I will. I will, as long as I believe in his innocence, I'll continue to work the case indefinitely." And I'm still working the case. The man is absolutely innocent. Once you become involved in a major investigation like this, you have to sit down and read everything, and there was a 6-week trial, and you have to analyze it, and you have to decide which direction you're going to go, of course. And I have pretty good instincts when I become involved in these cases. I said to myself right away, immediately, I have an idea, I have a feeling there's drugs involved here. And so once I get into the case, start investigating it, I ended up October the 25th, 1980, I ended up with a confession from a girl named Helena Stokely. Now this case has been the subject of a major investigation and 2 books and a movie. And it's called Fatal Vision, if you happen to recall it. So within 10 months, as I said, I had this confession from Helena Stokely. She was the girl, if you know the case, in the floppy white hat. She was the girl who Jeff MacDonald said at the time he was fighting off his assailants, a black male, 2 white males, and Helena, when he was laying on the couch in the living room. She was chanting, "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs. Acid is groovy, kill the pigs." So Helena gives me this confession. I have it, by the way, I have a videotape of a confession from her. I don't have it with me tonight, but you can order it. I don't think it's even on my order blank, so I have to update my order blank. But I have this confession on audio tape. And long story short, I had 3 sessions with her, a total of about 30 days. And we just went right down the line. And what we ended up having in this case was huge, major cover-up. This was a case that involved flying drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities of the dead GIs coming out of Southeast Asia in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. Now, you're saying to me, how do you know, Ted, just because some girl tells you that? Well, if you want to do your own research, or if you want to buy some of my research, I have a summary on that case, by the way. This is written up, this technique of bringing the drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities. Time Magazine, January 1, 1973. I was in the case, of course, in 1980, 81. That's when I broke it. So, the case today, and so I'm saying to myself, what's going on here? I mean, evidence was lost, stolen, destroyed. People are lying on the witness stand. What's going on here? And after I got the confession and developed more information, I realized it was a huge drug cover-up. And Helena Stokely, who gave me the confession, was a member of a satanic cult. And her cult was distributing these drugs up and down the East Coast. And Helena also told me that there were 7 people in the house that night who were involved in the murder, and she suspected that 2 of them were CIA agents, Criminal Investigative Division, Department of the Army agents, who had infiltrated her cult, which I think is probably one of the major reasons for the cover-up, because can you imagine their own undercover people being involved in a triple murder? The liability there, and not only that, but the publicity. Cover-up, huge cover-up, absolutely no question about it. Evidence was lost, as I said, stolen, destroyed, altered, and the latest information on that case, okay, so that's the case that woke me up, right? And the latest information on that case, in 1997, the judge said we're going to do DNA tests based on motions filed by the criminal defense attorneys of Dr. McDonald's. And here we are, 2004, they still haven't done the DNA tests. And the judge also said, okay, we're going to examine 15 pieces of evidence, and only the prosecution can be present when the evidence envelopes are open. You want to guess what happened when the prosecution opened the evidence without the defense attorneys being present? 5 of them were empty. 5 of them were empty. How disgusting, how revolting. And I went public with this information. I was on radio, TV, and people came out of the woodwork from all parts of the country and started talking to me about satanic cults. This is what's behind the evil in this country today, in the government, at virtually every level of the government, virtually every level of society. These people, Illuminati/satanic cults, have infiltrated our society, particularly in the government, federal government, city, county, state. I have statements. I have phone calls. I have people coming from all parts of the country talking to me, trying to give me information. I have so much information on this. I have so many people demanding my time, and I can't handle it all. I'm basically the Lone Ranger. I operate by myself. I've tried to operate with other people. It doesn't seem to work out because the government puts too many people in my presence, plants people on me, okay. And I'm the Lone Ranger. I just can't handle it all. I can't possibly handle it all. I don't have Tonto working with me. So that's it. But I'm doing the best I can. And one of my goals, about the only thing I can do, because I do have this inside information, this basic information about corruption in our society and what's behind it, one of my goals is to come out and educate as many people as possible. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here talking to you. That's why Wendy's had me back a number of times. Jordan is in the same position I'm in. He's educating as many people as possible also. And I urge you to get as much of my material as you can afford and make copies and distribute it to your friends. This is a nickel and dime business for me. Sure, I might make $5 on a book, but what's that? The important thing is get the information out. And I have a couple of things I'd like to bring up before I get into the main portion of my lecture, which is going to be the gigantic cover-ups that have taken place over the last 50, 60 years that I know of. This is a video that I have. This is called Conspiracy of Silence. Now, one of the reasons Congress passes the Patriot Act without any opposition, establish Homeland Security, 170,000 people, right, who are going to tell us and protect us about the terrorist movement. One of the reasons Congress passes this is because of what's on this videotape. In the 1980s, I became involved in an investigation in the Midwest. It's called the Franklin Cover-Up. John DeCamp, a prominent attorney there and good friend, who is a former state senator, called. He didn't call me. One of his friends called me, said, you got to come back here because the last investigator that was working with us, Gary Curadori, died in an airplane crash. By the way, that's one of their favorite ways of getting rid of you. Airplane crashes, automobile accidents, heart attacks, cancer, and so forth. But Gary, a former Nebraska state trooper, had done some outstanding work. And he had come up with some pictures in Chicago of some of our leading politicians having sex with children. Again, this is satanic cults now. And he was flying these pictures from Chicago to Lincoln, Nebraska, his home. It's where John DeCamp's from also. And short distance out of Chicago, his plane exploded, and he was killed along with his 11-year-old son. He had the smoking gun of this case, and this case involved flying children from the Midwest to Washington, D.C. for sex orgies with congressmen and senators. Now, this case involves children who are being taken out of foster homes, Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska, orphanages, driving them from Omaha to Sioux City, Iowa, 184 miles away, placing them in private jets, and flying them to D.C. for this specific purpose. Also, while investigating this case, I learned about an organization called the Finders. The Finders is an international child trafficking, kidnapping organization in Washington, D.C. I have a report on it. I urge you folks to look at it, buy it, make copies of it, and get it out. In here, I have a U.S. Customs report by a customs agent that documents this information. A lot more details are involved, of course. But going back to this videotape, in the early 1990s, Yorkshire TV, the American media would not touch this, of course. Yorkshire TV in England sent a crew over here for 7 months to document this show, this case, and it was listed in TV Guide to be aired May the 3rd, 1994. When certain members of Congress found out about it, somebody anonymously bought up the rights and ordered all copies destroyed. This is a bootleg copy of the show. I have a package deal that I'm making available to you. Involves this video, the Finders report, which ties into this, why Johnny can't come home, story about a 12-year-old, 11-year-old newspaper boy, 12 years old, Johnny Gosh, kidnapped in West Des Moines, Iowa, sold to the cults, and thereafter used as a sex toy. He later, by the way, escaped along with another young boy. They stole a car, and Johnny has been in hiding ever since. I happen to know he's alive today. He was hiding on a reservation, Indian reservation in northern Minnesota for a number of years. In 2020 came along, decided they wanted to do a show like Yorkshire TV did in England. And I talked to a girl named Karen Burns, who was the producer. And she started poking around on the Indian reservation, so Johnny had to take off. But this package also includes pawns in the game. Now, pawns in the game. I gave a lecture on the McDonald case, as a matter of fact, about 8 or 9 years ago in Los Angeles. And when I came off the podium, this stranger walks up to me, hands me pawns in the game. He says, "Ted, this is what it's all about. Read it. This is what it's all about. This is a story about Bush and Kerry and the Rockefellers and the Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergs. It's all right here. And it's all about the Illuminati. The Illuminati was established back in the 17th century. 1776 was, May the 1st, 1776 was when the 25 goals were announced by Adam Weishaupt to take over the world. And that's on pages 26, 27 of this book. These goals included corrupt the youth through sex and drugs, elect our own people to the higher offices and political positions. If you can't elect your own people, put your own agentures in as advisors. control the media with sex and drugs with the kids. I mean, that's obvious. That's obviously what's happened. Control the media. I have in my research a document from the congressional record, February the 9th, 1917, wherein Congressman Callaway from Texas announced on the floor that the J.P. Morgan interests had bought up 25 of America's leading newspapers and inserted their own editors in order to control the press. Anyway, this whole package is available for, and then I have the Franklin cover-up book, which is out of print right now, but that's part of the package. And if you decide you want to buy this package, $85, I will put you on back order for the Franklin cover-up book. John DeCamp, the attorney I told you about just a moment ago, is in the process of getting another edition of this out. But this is a story about how I became involved in these issues. I started thinking for myself. I started doing my own research, and I couldn't idly sit by and allow these things to happen without trying to do something about it. Now, that brings me up to, that was a pretty long introduction. I was going to talk about terrorism tonight, right? Okay, that brings me up to terrorism. And I've told you what's going on, and I've told you why it's going on, and I've told you how they're framing the congressmen, the senators, sex and drugs. These men are despicable, absolutely despicable in Washington, the ones that we sent back there. But when you look back, go back to December 7, 1941. I've talked to a naval intelligence officer, he's dead now, who on December the 4th was in Washington, D.C., and he was the one who received the notice that we had broken the Japanese code and the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor. He sent that notice, he gave that notice to his superior officer, and he never heard anything more about it afterwards, until after World War II. Congress started investigating it. They handed him a subpoena. His superior officer said, don't even bother to go. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And, you know, you'll understand later on. He never did appear before Congress. But we had that information. Meantime, we could have pulled the fleet out of the harbor in Pearl Harbor. Didn't. We had 2,400 boys go down in the USS Arizona alone. Pearl Harbor, cover-up. And then let's go on to Dallas, Texas. Jack Kennedy assassination. There is an outstanding documentary called The Men Who Killed Kennedy, produced by Nigel Turner out of England. Again, English to the rescue, right? And I think this is the best documentary that there is. It's a 6-hour. It airs about every 6 months. Lee Harvey Oswald was a puppet. He was a pawn. Pawns in the game, right? There were other people involved there. There's no question about it. It was a hit, in my opinion, based on my research, everything I've been able to develop, by a combination of the mob and the CIA. Sam Giancana, head of the La Cosa Nostra in Chicago, was to testify before Congress. 3 days before he was to testify, he was shot, killed, murdered. Never made it. That's the way they get rid of you. Okay? So, from there, no question, a cover-up. Arlen Specter was just reelected senator of Pennsylvania, by the way. That man is unbelievable. He's the one on the Warren Commission who had the magic bullet theory. The bullet went here, 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 ricocheted off 3 bones, and then hit at a 90-degree angle, and that was it. We have a similar situation with the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. Okay? Anyway, Arlen Specter was just reelected. I have 2 sons that live in Pennsylvania. That's one of the first questions I asked, and he's back in Congress again. Bobby Kennedy. There were more bullet holes in the walls, the doors, 11 of them, than Saran's gun could hold. Saran's gun would only hold 8 bullets. Now, Daryl Gates, chief of police, LAPD at the time, now retired. Daryl Gates has a book out. I happened to pick it up the other day in a used bookstore, $10. That's about what it's worth as far as I'm concerned. And I think I paid $2 for it. I'm not sure. Anyway, he gives the same dissertation basically that our inspector does on Jack Kennedy. Explains how this could happen, that could happen, and there were still only 8 bullets, but so what? For your information, the LAPD is just another branch of the CIA, as far as I'm concerned. Okay? Wait till I tell you, I'll tell you a little story about these people. I have absolute proof that the night that Bobby Kennedy was murdered, because he was going to be the next president of the United States, there were 8 LAPD officers there, all of whom have ties or had ties to the CIA. Absolutely no question about it. Now, before I go on to some more cover-ups, let me give you a little bit about a recent experience I had with the LAPD. They're no better than a corrupt FBI as far as I'm concerned. I'm telling you, these people have infiltrated LAPD, FBI, these other police departments. Philadelphia Police, I talked to a friend back there. Same situation. The Christians in the Philadelphia Police Department are not being given promotions. They're promoting everybody but the Christians. When they find out you're a Christian, they don't promote you. I have this from a good source. So recently, I'm in and out of L.A. regularly, by the way. And last fall, I was at my daughter's apartment. She was on the East Coast. I was staying there doing some work. And about 10:15 a.m., I was standing next to the window. It was shot out. Window was shot out. And then, after that, of course, I made a police report on it. And then I started receiving some threatening phone calls, which I've been receiving for 25 years, by the way. And the third phone call at my daughter's apartment mentioned her by name. There's satanic chanting, and her name, and then more satanic chanting. And I said, they can mess with me, but they're not going to mess with my daughter. That is hands off, because she has nothing to do with this. In fact, she thinks I'm a kook, but, so be that as it may. Let her think that. I just want them to stay away from her. So I marched down to the LAPD Wilcox Division, and I have my recording, and I play the recording to Detective Pat Barron. He says, yes, that is a threat. No question, we're going to put a trap on your line right away. And I told him I was ex-FBI. You know what a trap is? A trap is where they lock into any number that's coming to you. In other words, if I receive a phone call, I pick it up, whoever called me, it locks into, and the police can identify that person. So I said, great. Now, I go home to my daughter's apartment, receive a call from a police officer who's in charge of this division. He says, just want to confirm we're going to put a trap on your line. And I'm thinking to myself, this wasn't too smart because my telephone line is probably being tapped. But anyways, so be it. They put the trap on the line. I received 7 more threatening phone calls. And I'm saying, good. Let's have 7 more, and let's have 7 more after that, because we're going to find out who these people are who have been calling me for 25 years. And I go back to Las Vegas, my home. I call Pat Barron, Ted Gunderson. Ted who? Gunderson. Ted who? Gunderson. Don't you remember me? No, I don't remember you. Trap, telephone trap, remember? What trap? Yes, telephone trap on my line, my daughter's line. I don't know what you're talking about. So I file a complaint with Internal Affairs. Okay, well, that's not so good. Because what happened was I'm writing back and forth to Internal Affairs. And I'm talking to Pat Barron. And I even get the Internal Affairs file number, right? The file number by which they investigated the case. And then I receive a letter. There's no misconduct on the part of the LAPD, and no trap was ever set on that line. So incidental to another case, I said to myself, they're not going to outsmart me. through a friend, a paralegal friend of mine, we issued a subpoena based on this other case. This other case involved, we think, satanic cults, a hospital that's murdering their patients for body parts, the whole 9 yards, which is like the kids. The kids are selling on the auction block for $50,000 each. In the Nebraska case, going back to the Nebraska case, Paul Benassi, who was one of the kids who came forward and told us about this and was part of their network, they used him as a decoy to attract other kids over, and then the adults would grab them, has attended 6 such auctions where the kids were placed on a stage, as many as 36 and as few as 6 in those 6 auctions. Ages 2 to 21, they put the kids in their underwear, boys and girls. They put a label around their neck and put a sign on there, number 305, and that's what they bid on. So, going back to the telephone trap. And so based on this case where we think that they are selling body parts, killing people in the hospital and selling body parts, we issued a subpoena to the LAPD. And in the subpoena we say, we want all the information from file number so-and-so and so-and-so, internal affairs investigation. Receive a letter back. There's no record of us ever having had any contact with you in the LAPD. They shot out my window, complaints, telephone complaints. I've made all kinds of complaints. They've been in and out of my car. They've come into my house. August the 2nd, they came into my home while I'm sleeping, sometime between midnight and 3 a.m., took the bathrobe off the foot of the bed and laid it out ceremoniously in front next to the bed, just to let me know they're around. Last night, they were in my car. They flipped the hazard lights on. I'm going down, I left my sister's in Orange County. I'm driving down the freeway, and I look, my hazard lights are on. I didn't touch my hazard lights. They just let me know they're around. They're probably in this audience right now, which is fine. I could care less. But here we have not only the FBI, this is an example of corruption within the LAPD, and it's going on across America. So we talked about Bobby Kennedy, another cover-up. Ruby Ridge, the poor fellow, he refused to be an informant for BATF, and when he wouldn't be an informant, they sent another person in, one of their informants in, and got him purchasing a sawed-off shotgun that was 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch too short, which gave them authority by law to file a complaint against him. They filed a complaint. They served him. He didn't appear in court, so they go out with helicopters and sharpshooters and murder his wife. Horiuchi, the FBI sharpshooter, murdered the wife while she had the baby in her hands. And they tried, the FBI, Louis Freeh, the director, defended him. They tried to prosecute him for murder in Montana or Idaho, wherever, Ruby Ridge, Idaho it was. He got off of it. Horiuchi did. They tried Randy Weaver. Tried him for murder because one of the marshals was shot. Fortunately, he hired Jerry Spence, the famous lawyer from Wyoming, and he was able to get out of that. He's written a book about Ruby Ridge. Waco. That's another disgrace. There were 4 BATF agents murdered at Waco. A number of Branch Davidians are serving life in prison right now for the murder of these 4 BATF agents. I was recently asked by the American Free Press, by the way, if you don't take American Free Press, I encourage you to subscribe to it, to analyze that case. One of the things that I do is I'm able to, because of my experience and training, come in and reconstruct the crime scene. And the first thing you do in a crime scene is, if a gun is used, or a bow and arrow, I don't care what it is you have to determine the trajectory of the weapon. I had a case in Temecula, a Digman case. This involves naval intelligence. I'll tell you very briefly about that, and then I'm going to come back to Waco. And in this case, he was a captain, Marine Corps captain. He was chairman of a military committee at the Marine base in San Diego, looking into the trafficking of drugs in the U.S. Marines. He knew too much. He was murdered in his own home. And naval intelligence said suicide. Now, Captain Digman was left-handed. A left-handed person who's going to commit suicide, you didn't think they would shoot from here to here. Entry, exit, no. It was, the bullet was entered here and exited here. He was laying back across the bed. There was blood transfer on the sheets. Blood transfer means that somebody moved the sheets or somebody moved the body or something, so the blood did not take a natural flow. And laying across the bed like this, entry here, exit here, the bullet should have gone through the wall up here, right? The bullet was back here, behind him. So what I did is I took a string and ran it from the ceiling down, and had he been sitting on the bed, which is what they claim happened, the trajectory of the bullet was 10 inches above his head. And I'm down there reconstructing it with naval intelligence officers. They'd already reconstructed it, of course, and come up with their conclusion. And they wanted to argue with me about, no, he shot himself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Cover up naval intelligence, drugs, San Diego, Marine Corps. Okay, so let's go back to Waco now. I was asked to write an article and analyze the murder of the 4 BATF agents. And based on my research and analysis of the case, every one of the BATF agents was shot in the head. Now, those of you who have been in the military know right now what that means. We had a sniper pick them off. The Branch Davidians are running for their life from the fire. Maybe they did shoot, maybe they didn't shoot, but those Branch Davidians did not murder those BATF agents. One of them, the trajectory of the bullet was from up above, and there was a helicopter there, of course, down in through the lip and down into the cavity of the body. Do you know what? Researched it more, and all 4 of those BATF agents were bodyguards at one time for Bill Clinton. Isn't that interesting? So Willis Carto, who was the publisher of the American Free Press, asked me to do an article on it. I just finished it. I just sent it in. I don't know if he's going to print it or not, but we'll see if that comes out. Okay, we have Waco, World Trade Center 93, February 26, 1993. The FBI had an informant, Salam. He was commissioned by the terrorists. He was in with the terrorists, commissioned by the terrorists to put the car bomb together. He goes to his FBI superiors. We're going to use a dummy bomb, aren't we? They said, no, we're going to use a real bomb. So the FBI not only knew in advance, they furnished the ingredients for the bomb through him. The reason he was not prosecuted is because he wore a body mic when he talked to the terrorists, and unknown to the FBI, he wore a body mic when he talked to the FBI. Otherwise, he probably would have gone to jail with the other terrorists. Joseph was the head terrorist. Joseph, by the way, CIA trained. So this was written up. You want documentation? This was written up on October 28, 1993. In the New York Times. This information came out during the trial. I don't understand why. I do understand. But Congress, somebody in Congress should say, what's going on here that the FBI furnished ingredients for a bomb, the World Trade Center? Fortunately, the car bomb, was not parked where it should have been parked. When they brought it in to park it next to one of the support beams, another car was illegally parked there, so they had to put it elsewhere. But that, regardless, that explosion went 6 floors deep. And there were I think there were six people killed, $1 million in damage. I forget the figures on that. But there are a lot of innocent people killed on that. No investigation to speak of. And then Oklahoma City, April the 19th, 1995. I personally made 2 trips to Oklahoma City out of my pocket. I'm famous for that, spending my own money for these things. And I have an inside investigator tell me that there were at least 11 other individuals involved in Oklahoma City besides McVeigh and Nichols. Jolly West, one of the foremost active MK Ultra CIA mind control experts, visited McVeigh when he was incarcerated in Oklahoma City and in Colorado. McVeigh was a patsy. He was a mind control victim, as far as I'm concerned, based on everything I've seen. The car bomb was not an ammonia nitrate bomb. First they said it was a 1,500-pound bomb. Then they said 2,500. And then they finally got it up to 4,800. And I'm sure that the reason they kept increasing the weight of the bomb was because people were I'm sure the experts were saying, hey, a bomb, 1,500 pounds wouldn't make that damage. That car bomb was actually a bomb that was developed by the government called an electrohydrodynamic gaseous fuel device. I'll call it a barometric bomb for short. It was developed by Hercules Manufacturing Company, Silicon Valley, for the U.S. government. The person who developed that bomb was Michael Riconosciuto, a good friend of mine. His father was CIA. They owned the Hercules Manufacturing in Hercules, California. And Michael told me that at the time of Oklahoma City, there were only 10 government scientists who knew how to put that bomb together. Now, General Parton came out with a theory that, about the car bomb and the conventional bombs on the inside. He and I were in difference over this situation, but he's right and I'm right, I think. What happened is the barometric bomb went off, followed 9 seconds later by a conventional bomb on the inside. And then there were 4 other bombs on the inside of Oklahoma City, conventional bombs, that did not explode. There was a defect somehow there. And the reason we know that is because the editor of Fireman's Magazine, September 1995, wrote an article based on information furnished to him by the Oklahoma City Fire Department. And in that article, and I have that article, by the way, in a 220-some page report, I wrote my own report on that. It states that the Oklahoma City Fire Department took 4 unexploded devices out of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City that day. I have a 6-hour video that has all the news broadcasts that afternoon from Oklahoma City. You only heard it for one afternoon. You didn't hear it afterwards. And a number of the announcers said, we're going to find out now who did this because they're bringing the unexploded bombs out. One of them has U.S. Army stenciled on the side of it. This is all on the news. Now, on the barometric bomb, I researched through one of my colleagues the contract number for that bomb. Got it out of a science magazine. Wrote to the Picatinny Arsenal, New Jersey, where contracts are sent in connection with government work by private enterprise. And I gave them the contract number. I said, I want a copy of the contract. They wrote back and said, there's no such number here. There's no such contract here. And I then wrote to Dyna Nobel in Salt Lake City, because I know that they were the ones that actually assembled that bomb, according to my informants. And I never even received a response back from them. It's interesting to note that a so-called expert from Dyna Nobel in Salt Lake City testified at the grand jury that this car bomb was a conventional bomb, ammonia nitrate fertilizer bomb. So we have Oklahoma City cover-up. Going back, we have Pearl Harbor, Jack Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Waco, Ruby Ridge, Waco, World Trade Center 93, Oklahoma City. And now that brings us to the World Trade Center. There has been so much publicity on the World Trade Center, it's unbelievable. But let me go back again to Mike Riconosciuto. Michael it was a government agent for some 20 years, worked for the agency, CIA, and Michael put a trap door in the Promise software. The Promise software was a computer operation developed by Nancy and Bill Hamilton out of Washington, D.C. What this computer did, it tied in all of law enforcement, all the courts, local, city, federal, and so forth, all the intelligence information in one location. And the Department of Justice leased it from the Hamiltons for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, they refused to pay the $10 million that they owed to the Hamiltons. And the Hamiltons sued in bankruptcy court. They won, but the court said, hey, you're in the wrong court, you got to go to another court. Anyway, Michael, when he was with the agency, put a trap door in the Promise software. And then after the Department of Justice refused to pay the Hamiltons, they handed it to a fellow named Earl Bryant, past owner of United Press International. Bryant took that computer, Promise software, and sold it around the world, sold it to the Canadians, the French, English, the Israelis. Unknown to all these foreign countries, this trap door was there. So when they were developing their intelligence information, we were stealing it or retrieving it from them. Very clever, huh? The Brooks Committee knew about this. They called on Michael to testify. And Michael received a phone call from a fellow named Peter Vietnix, according to him, Department of Justice. If you testify, you'll be sorry. And he testified anyway, and shortly thereafter, he was arrested for drugs. Tried, convicted, and sentenced to 30 years, first offense. Now, I tell you this because before Michael became involved in this drug arrest, I had a call from a former top-level Reagan administrator, asked if I could help the Afghan rebels in their fight against the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 1980s. I called Michael. I said, Michael, what do you think? He said, well, let's meet with him. So we met right down the road at the Hilton Hotel at Sepulveda and Ventura Boulevard, when it was the Hilton Hotel. And there were two people, one from the State Department / CIA, obviously, and another individual was there. He was a tall, lanky fellow, clean-shaven. And I find out years later, that it was Osama bin Laden. And the way I found out, it came out on the internet. I didn't know who he was. He was traveling under the name of Tim Osman with a Turkish passport. Michael went on. I just introduced him and went about my way. But Michael went on and traveled all over the world and put this deal together and was responsible for the surface-to-air missiles that defeated the Soviets. And I walked from it. But my point is that Michael, in dealing with the Arabs, developed contacts on the inside. Michael, in spite of the fact that he's in prison, was able to develop additional information because he has relatives also in the Middle East. And for a year, now Michael was tried and convicted in the early 90s. For a year prior to 911, I tried to get in to see Michael. I'm his, quote, investigator of record. And investigator of records and attorneys representing individuals who are incarcerated have the privilege of going in and talking to them, in reasonable hours. You don't have to go with the visitation hours. So I tried to get in to see Michael. They wouldn't let me in. I'm even in Philadelphia. Michael's in prison in northern Pennsylvania. And I couldn't get in. They refused. The Bureau of Prisons refused. Department of Justice refused. I finally got in to see Michael in January 2003. And Michael told me that he had developed information in January, February 2001, 6 months prior to 911, concerning the forthcoming attacks in the United States. His attorney, he tried to get the FBI to come interview him. They wouldn't. His attorney in Chicago wrote Colin Powell and said, I have a client who has information about forthcoming terrorist attacks, and as a result of that, we think as a result of that. They sent an FBI agent, Keith Kutry, in to interview Michael on March the 20th, 2001, 6 months prior to 9/11. At that time, Michael gave Agent Kutry information about terrorist attacks. Now, I have a report. This report's available to you folks, by the way, in the back there. I have a 50-page report, sells for $10, and a 100-page report that sells for $20. At that time, Michael told Agent Kutry, and I'll read from the report, and gave him the identity of the person in the United States who was coordinating forthcoming attacks, who lived in Paterson, New Jersey, gave him information about Soviet-made shoulder-fired missiles in the United States. It's on page 2 of the report, by the way. Was coordinating forthcoming skyjackings, was coordinating bombings and espionage, knew the identity of sleepers in the United States and overseas. He also furnished Agent Kutry information on a false identification ring out of Montreal, Canada, and New Jersey, and said he would furnish the exact false IDs of 30 terrorists who had been chosen for action inside the United States. 30 terrorists, not 20. 6 airplanes, not 4, by the way. Michael gave him this information March the 20th. He further told Agent Kutry that the 37 Soviet-made missiles were being handled through F.B.I Aviation, Quebec City, Canada, which also brokered old but serviceable aircraft to be used in drug running and future terrorist attacks in the so-called 40-minute war scenario by using aircraft as flying missiles. Reconnaissance also furnished S.A. Kutry information about terrorists who were taking flight training, and he also furnished S.A. Kutry with the identity of one of his informants who agreed to cooperate with the F.B.I. Now, going back to Thabet, T-H-A-B-E-T Aviation, Quebec City, Canada, my report was posted on the internet. 3 weeks after my report was posted, Thabet Aviation, Quebec City, Canada, changed its name and moved 3 blocks away. This information was furnished to the FBI 6 months prior. He thought he'd done his job as an American citizen, prevented a terrorist attack. However, 2 days after 9/11, September 13th, Agent Kutry comes back, and he accuses Mike of being a hoax, being anti-government, anti-FBI, of furnishing false information, of a conspiracy theorist. I guess that makes all of us bad people. Of a know-it-all, a hoaxer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Did nothing with it. In the meantime, I'm saying to myself, I have to document that the FBI interviewed him on March the 20th because Michael tried to get the records from the Bureau of Prisons and they wouldn't give them to him, the exact date that he was visited by the FBI agent Kutry. I spent a year and a half writing letters to Senator Allen of Virginia, and they would furnish the letters to the FBI, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, trying to get the FBI to admit that they had interviewed Michael March the 20th. They wouldn't do it. It took me a year and a half. I finally pinned them down, and I got them to admit that they interviewed Mike, and that's in my report too, by the way. But you should read the letters that the FBI wrote and that I wrote, back and forth, back and forth. It took me a year and a half for them to confirm this. By the way, in the meantime, going back to the trap on my phone in L.A., the FBI was furnished this information by the LAPD. We served a subpoena on them, and they're not giving it, the information to us either. The FBI is not giving information to us either. So that's what's happened on the latest information on 911. There's all kinds of documentation about other people being involved in it. And I passed out a flyer. I wanted to make sure everybody received a copy of this, and I want you to make copies and get it out to each one of you. Now, this is self-explanatory in the memo that I wrote, but on September 8th, one of my contacts told me that he thought he knew why the terrorists, or why the Arabs, not terrorists, the Arabs in this country today were so interested in the crop dusting airplanes. And he put it together, and he called me on September the 8th. He says, you know what? I think that they're going to use a cloud bomb, and that's why they want to look at the crop dusting planes. And the Arabs have been traveling all over the Midwest particularly, taking pictures of crop dusting airplanes and locating different airplanes and so forth. The next day, September the 9th, as you can see from the memo, North Korea exploded a cloud over North Korean-Chinese border, near the border, 2 miles in diameter, a cloud 2 miles in diameter. And I called my source back. He said, I think you're right. I think that that's what we're looking at. And my source then furnished the information to the FBI. FBI field agents, they were very anxious to investigate it, started investigating it, and all of a sudden they quit communicating with my source. And the last I heard, the Homeland Security people had written to the FBI in the field and basically told them to back off. Do we have another cover-up? I'm afraid so. Is this the weapon that they're going to use against us? I'm afraid so. My approach on this is, if we go public with it now, maybe we can prevent it from happening. If we'd gone public about advanced information about 911, maybe we would have prevented it from happening. So that's what I did. And I sent this information to the American Free Press, and just last Friday they did an article on it. So it's out in the public. It's unfortunate that I don't think that the mainstream media is going to do anything about it, but at least you have a copy of it and get the word out to as many people as possible. I think I've run the gamut on this. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, the cloud bomb is, this is in the memo, by the way. The cloud bomb is, they disperse diesel fuel, make a cloud out of the diesel fuel, and it's, in North Korea, it was 2 miles in diameter, and then they use another chemical to explode it, to ignite it, and everything underneath it is crushed, and it's the cloud is at 3,000 feet, by the way, followed by fire. Now, if they did this across the country on, say, even a dozen different locations, you can imagine the devastation. But can you imagine doing it over the San Diego freeway during rush hour, or the 110, or downtown L.A.? Yes. The last question before this was, can you explain the cloud bomb? Yeah, okay. This way we get it on
If you
tape.
have a question for Mr. Gunderson, just come to the mic.
Yeah. Okay, now, they've been spraying with these chemtrails for 3-4 years, and they just started really giving it to us again. I think they're on the C-130s, but they say they're not even, they're just robotically, they are spraying everything. They started out with 4 countries, and then they went to 14, now the whole world's getting it. Now, they spread out all over the higher stratus. If they set something off like that, I mean, the whole country is going to get seared, burned. So what do you do in a case like this? Because, see, I want to have you on the TV station with me, and we're going to really let the people know. And if I get shot, I don't care, just so we get it out, This is what we have to do.
Well, how soon we got it going on TV station?
I've got 7 channels, 4 nights.
I'll be here I'll be here the 18th. I'll be back here the 18th, and I'll talk about going on either the 17th or the 19th. Can you do it then?
We're going to sure try.
Okay.
We'll try.
If you can't, I'll come back later.
Okay. Yeah.
That gentleman has a series of TV stations. Yeah. So, where are you heard? Okay. What channel are you on? You want to come up here to the mic and announce that? Let's get that on.
It's called the DeLoss Show. I'm on 98.
Spell it.
DELOS, the DeLoss Show. That's my name. Okay, it's on 98, channel 98, 77, 37. Oh, they're all different times in the evenings. Prime time, 8 o'clock till 9:30. Okay, there is channel 98, 77, 37, 3, 23, 25, and 34.
Very good.
Time Warner, it covers the whole Southern California.
Good. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with this new tape and information that's out concerning the fact that the planes that crashed into the Trade Center, they're saying, had no windows in them?
Yes, I'm
And if
familiar
so,
with that.
Pardon me?
I'm familiar with that.
What is your opinion of that?
I mean, if we can prove that, it's fine. I've seen the pictures like you have, and I'd say it's a good possibility that I've seen the theory. I've heard the theory on that the other planes went out over the Atlantic and somebody just exploded them and dropped them in the ocean. I think that's all possible. I just don't know. I'm like you. I've seen it. I don't know if it's true or not. I assume there's a good possibility it's true. By the way, speaking of that, I have pictures of the World Trade Center buildings explosions back there on my desk. What happened is a contact of mine took the news broadcasts of NBC that afternoon, 911, and slowed the frames down to 30 seconds, 30 frames per second. Thanks, Doug. And you can see here explosions at around about the 80th floor. I don't know if you want to zero in on that or not. You want to zero in on that? This is the one real telltale explosion right here where my finger is. And there's a set of 4 pictures with 4. Well, there's 4 on 3 pages. That's 12, 30, 14 pictures altogether. And these are slowed down, not 30 frames per second, so that's where you can see the explosion, yeah. Hey, there's a lot of questions about 911, just as there's questions about Kennedy. And to be honest with you, I think we're going to have a major cover-up. TW-800. I mean, there were 100 people on the shore that night who saw a missile hit TW-800. And yet Kallstrom, the FBI coordinator and expert and former assistant director in the New York office, says it was by defective wiring. Every pilot I've talked to says that's not possible.
Right.
Another cover-up. They're masters at it. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you for your information. Could you explain the fact that in Oklahoma City, they began to clear the debris out from the building within the next day, and the same company pulled the same thing at the World Trade Centers, and I've only seen that mentioned one time. Could you explain that?
That's true. Well, it's part of I would say it's part of the cover-up, part of the same company cleared up both facilities, Oklahoma City and the World Trade Center. It explains itself. And then another interesting facet to that, I had 2 members of the defense team for McVeigh contact me because of the work that I had done on Oklahoma City and my report. I sent my report to the defense team, and they came out and interviewed me for 4.5 hours. And they told me that they went on the property after the bombing to gather dirt soils and samples, because from the dirt you can tell, from the taggants, from the bombs, you can tell who manufactured the bombs. You can trace the bombs. It's like your fingerprints. And the marshal accompanied them, wouldn't let them pick up anything. All he could do is walk around and look at it. Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ted, I'm glad you brought up about the Oklahoma bombing, because after I left Las Vegas, I moved to Denver to investigate the Columbine massacre, and one of our conferences, we had an all-day, all-weekend event, and one was a nuclear engineer who had retired, and he went down and met with General Parton, and he gave testimony at the grand jury investigation in Oklahoma City, and he said he took a 5-gallon bucket because he said it was amazing where they had all this rubble from Oklahoma Mirror Building. They had barbed wire around there and guards. He said, why would they have guards at a place like that? So he was able to persuade one of the guards to give him rubble in that 5-gallon. He said it has the blueprint. It was an atomic explosion, which ties in what we were talking about, probably a barometric bomb. But he said that will be there for the next 20,000 years or longer. But he said that it's just amazing that a scientist like him could get that kind of evidence, but we never saw it in the papers.
Well, has he has he gone public with it?
Oh yes, we got him on video giving his testimony to us.
Who did he give the testimony to?
To our group. When we had a conference that weekend.
In Colorado?
Yes, in Denver. Yeah.
Yeah, well, typical. When they hauled it off, they put it behind a fence and nobody could get to it. The rubble and the dirt. Yes, sir. You have a question?
I understand that, is it General Parton?
Yeah, General Parton.
General Parton did some calculations on that epicenter of that bomb and the pressures that were involved as it moved away, which is, I guess they drop off at 1/d² or d cubed, I'm not sure.
Right.
And so when you got out to the end there wasn't much pressure, and yet those big columns went down. Was his testimony or his information allowed?
No, I don't think anybody paid any attention to him. Yeah, but they didn't do anything with it.
So it was effectively cut out from the investigation.
Didn't do anything. I think Parton was right and I was right. Initially, Parton said that there was no barometric bomb, but there was a barometric bomb, number one, and then it was followed 9 seconds by a conventional bomb, which blew the rebar also outward, which indicated the bomb was from the inside.
Thank you.
And then, as I said, there were four other conventional bombs that were taken out of there, according to this magazine. Yes.
Hi, Ted. When you mentioned earlier Flight 800, who of any importance might have been on that airplane?
I'd heard that there might have been a couple of detectives from Arkansas on there, weren't there, Doug? Yeah.
I also heard.
Huh? They were going to Paris, I heard. England? Yeah. And also,
somebody told me that it was John Birch.
John who?
John Birch.
I don't know. It was a massive cover-up. Who knows what was on this? Ed Saunders, I think that's his name. He and his wife got one of the people on the inside to give him a cloth, a sample, which they had analyzed, which established that it was an explosive device. And then the government prosecuted them and put them in jail. Carol Howe, Oklahoma City, was a BATF informant. And she came forward and told about the fact that she had given them advance information. They prosecuted her. Fortunately, she was acquitted. They planned to prosecute me back in the 80s. I was one day away from being indicted by a grand jury in Dallas. And it didn't work. And then, listen a minute, Doug. And then when that didn't work, I had several occasions when gunmen were waiting for me. And then when that didn't work, the government put a girl named Pam Fawcett on me, tried to set me up and frame me on a drug deal, and that didn't work. Now they've got a guy named Stu Webb out there, who's an FBI informant, putting disinformation about me on the internet. When I said earlier in my lecture, good and bad information, well, he's the guy that's putting most of the disinformation out. And very frankly, as a result of, it's worked. As a result of his negative information about me, I receive very few lecture requests anymore. People are afraid of me. They think I'm an FBI informant or whatever, Doug, I'm not an FBI informant.
Right. Well, and he's the FBI informant, right?
He's the FBI informant. He's disinformation specialist.
Letter he wrote to the FBI, right?
Yeah.
Saying that he was an FBI informant.
Well, he was on a video where he bashed me on a video. So I ordered a copy of the video from John Gentry in Dallas, And 23 minutes into the video, he says that he's working for Robin Sandoval, FBI in Las Vegas, and he's been given a symbol number. Now, the symbol number to the average person doesn't mean anything, but to me, it means the FBI gave him a symbol number, so when they attribute information to him in a report, it does not identify him as the source. I took this video, I watched it on my couch. I said, I can't believe that he said that, because that's what I needed. That's the smoking gun for me to prove he's an informant. I took this video and made copies and sent it about 10 days later after I saw it. Sent it to a couple of friends of mine. They called back and said, there's nothing in there about him being given a symbol number. I said, what? So I got the video down and I ran it again, and it's not there. It was gone. Which means somebody came into my apartment and put another videotape in there and took the other one. My apartment's like Grand Central Station. I mean, and I've had so many people planted on me, I feel like I'm in the Garden of Eden. I'm serious. I mean, they were in my car last night. Put the blinker lights on when I got on the freeway this morning. Here's my flashlights going on. I wish these guys would quit playing with me, but I just, I don't pay attention to them. They monitor me through my TV screen. And that's how they knew that I had identified Stu Webb as an informant, because they were there watching me when I was watching the video. This is a tech, and I've confirmed this, by the way, that they have the capability of doing this. And you're telling me that they couldn't keep track of 20 or 30 terrorists, and they're keeping track of me? They got me covered like a blanket, right? That 20 or 30 terrorists, they're going to steal airplanes? I don't believe that. That's not possible. They knew in advance. And as far as I'm concerned, they're part of the people in our government are a part of it. And the whole answer is pawns in the game. Illuminati take over the world. One world order, new world government. Okay, question.
And of course, the Christians 2 days ago, the goose stepped to the ballot box and Heil Hitler to Bush, right?
Well, I'm getting sick and tired of hearing the radio and TV commentators say that the evangelical Christians elected George Bush, who was a Christian, a born-again Christian. Skull and bones Satanist is what he is. I heard him on. I saw him on TV. What's the most? Who's been the most influenced in your whole life? The one person most influenced in your whole life? He said, Jesus Christ. That hypocritical, lying, sneaking rat. Pedophile. He's a pedophile. He was the kids in Nebraska, identified him as having sex with children. He and his father and Ronnie Reagan. I'm sorry to burst your balloon on Ronnie Reagan. These people are dirtbags. They're Satanists. They're trash. And it's the war against, it's a spiritual war. Good versus bad. Good versus bad. That's all there is to it. It can not be defined any other way. I hope I didn't scare you folks from asking any more questions. Huh? Yeah, the question is, the so-called plane hits Pentagon, how come it's a round circle? I don't know. There's a lot of questions unanswered. Any other questions? Okay, I guess that's it, folks. You can go home now. And thank you very much. Be sure to pick up my, one more question. Okay, don't go yet.
I wanted to know what you felt about the book, the Transformation
of America by
Right.
Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips.
Yes.
I have it documented from other sources. So
I
it's well documented from other sources.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
There's more than the presidential models. There's thousands of them in America, as far as I'm concerned. Most of them have not come forward. Yes, another question.
I have a curiosity question. What would the advantage would the government have with Waco and Oklahoma City? I just cannot figure where the government would want to do something like that, because I don't see where they got anything to gain. I can see Ruby Ridge. And
Well, I think in Waco, it was a BATF production to get more money on appropriations.
Oh, okay, I agree to that.
Yeah, okay. And what was the other one, 911 or
No, Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma
Yeah,
City?
right.
Oklahoma City, I think, was a prelude to Homeland Security and the Patriot Act.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And they didn't get it passed right away. It was introduced. You remember?
Oh, yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
I
It was
recall.
introduced, and there was an article in USA Today.
Mm-hmm.
Terrorists,
Yeah, I agree
is
with
on the
that.
fast track.
Yeah,
Yeah.
now that you bring it up, I do
Yeah.
agree with what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, another question here.
When there's a crime scene and the police arrive, what is the first thing they usually do?
Protect the scene.
Right. And then they bring in the forensic experts and they take evidence, right?
Photographs and evidence.
Why wasn't that done at the World Trade Center?
Because it's a cover-up. They don't want forensics.
That was big.
They don't want forensics.
How many millions of people in law enforcement across the country know the procedure and they know that that was violated and saw that happen and nobody
agree.
reported that crime?
Thousands. By the way, I forgot to mention Stanley Hilton, the attorney of San Francisco who's representing the families,
Yes.
is filing a lawsuit against George Bush and the rest of them, claiming that they not only knew in advance, they were part of it, that George Bush himself gave out the order. He has affidavits from insiders and also from terrorist's wife.
And so what's going to happen?
Nothing. Another cover-up.
What can be-
The courts, according to him, ordered him to drop the lawsuit. The judge did. Okay, I guess that's it, Wendy. Thanks, dear. Be sure to take a look at my material back there. Get copies and make copies. Thanks a lot, Wendy.
Well, let's thank Ted Gunderson one more time with a round of applause. Thank you so much for attending the Granada Forum. Check out Ted's stuff in the back. Excellent, his books, tapes, videos, and documentation on all kinds of stuff. We hope you enjoyed this wonderful presentation at the Granada Forum, and God bless.